What if I told you the most powerful man on earth just walked away from a war he promised to end in 24 hours, and in doing so sent a signal to every dictator on the planet that American power is now negotiable? Stick around, because what happened next will blow your mind. Good evening. Tonight we need to talk about something that history will remember, not just as a political moment, but as a turning point in the architecture of American power itself. And I need you to stay with me here, because what I am about to tell you is not just about one man. It is not just about one war. It is not just about one decision. This is about the oldest story in human civilization. The story of a leader who believed he could bend reality to his will, and the moment reality pushed back. If you are captivated by the unfolding drama of global power shifts and want to understand what is really happening behind the headlines, smash that like button and let the world know you are paying attention. Every click helps keep the search for truth alive in an age of noise and confusion. Now let me start with a question that will frame everything we discuss tonight. What does it feel like to be the most powerful man on earth and still lose control? Donald Trump knows that feeling right now, and the world is watching what he does next. When Trump returned to the White House in January of 2025, he came back with a mandate. Not just from voters, but from his own mythology. He was a deal maker. He was a disruptor. He was a man who, according to his own telling, could end wars with a phone call. He had spent years on the campaign trail, telling Americans that the war in Ukraine would be over in 24 hours. 24 hours. He said it with the confidence of a man who has never studied Clausewitz, never read Thucydides, never sat across a table from Vladimir Putin, and understood what it means to negotiate with a man who measures time not in news cycles but in centuries. And here is where the history begins. Because this is not the first time an American president walked into a geopolitical fire believing he carried a bucket of water large enough to drown it. You see, Lyndon Johnson believed the same thing about Vietnam. He was wrong. Richard Nixon believed American power could reshape the Middle East on his terms. He was wrong. George W. Bush stood on an aircraft carrier in 2003 and declared mission accomplished in Iraq. History laughed, slowly, painfully, at the cost of hundreds of thousands of lives. And now in the spring of 2026, we are watching the latest chapter of that very old American tragedy. The tragedy of overconfidence dressed up as strength. But by the end of this discussion, you will understand exactly why this moment is different. Why this retreat carries consequences that will echo for decades. And why the world order your children inherit may look nothing like the one we grew up believing was permanent. Let us go back further. Let us go to 1956. To Suez, when Britain and France, convinced of their imperial dominance, launched a military operation against Egypt. They thought they were in control. They were not. It was Eisenhower sitting in Washington who pulled the strings and forced them to retreat. The lesson of Suez is timeless. In geopolitics, the man who thinks he is orchestrating events is often the last one to realize he is merely reacting to them. Trump, I argue tonight, is America's Suez Moment. Not in military terms, but in terms of strategic illusion. And that distinction matters enormously, because what happens next will reshape the global balance of power in ways most people are not yet prepared to understand. Now let us talk about Ukraine, because that is where this analysis cuts deepest. When Trump entered his second term, Ukraine was bleeding. Russia had dug in across the front line, stretching hundreds of kilometers. Zelensky was exhausted but unbroken. Europe was fractured but functional. And Trump saw an opportunity, not to achieve justice, not to restore sovereignty, not to honor the principles of the post-World War II international order that American blood and treasure helped build. No, he saw an opportunity to perform a deal, to stage a negotiation, to walk out of a room with a handshake and call it peace. He dispatched envoys, he made phone calls, he floated proposals that stunned European capitals, proposals that would have effectively rewarded Russian aggression, frozen the front lines in Russia's favor, and asked Ukraine to surrender not just territory, but the very principle that borders cannot be changed by force. Zelensky rejected it. Europe recoiled. And something remarkable happened. Something that historians 50 years from now will spend entire chapters analyzing. Europe did not follow America. Europe stood up. And for the first time in the post-Cold War era, the transatlantic alliance, that sacred architecture built in 1949, cemented through the Marshall Plan, tested in Korea, proven in Kosovo, began to visibly crack. Not because of Russian aggression, but because of American abandonment. This is not just a diplomatic failure, this is a civilizational signal. And Trump did not see it coming because he was looking at the wrong map. He was looking at a map of domestic politics, of approval ratings, of fundraising narratives. He was not looking at the map that Putin looks at every morning. A map drawn not in ink, but in history, in blood, in the long memory of empires. Let me tell you about Putin for a moment, because you cannot understand Trump's retreat without understanding what Putin is. What Putin is a man who has read his history. He knows that Russia has absorbed catastrophe before. Napoleon came, Hitler came, sanctions came, and Russia endured. He has patience that Western democratic leaders who live and die by 4-year electoral cycles simply cannot match. When Trump called Putin, believing that personal charm and economic pressure could achieve in weeks what 3 years of military resistance could not, Putin understood exactly what was happening. He smiled metaphorically. Because Putin rarely smiles, and he waited. Because he knew that Trump needed a win more than Russia needed peace. And in negotiations, the one who needs it more loses. Every time. Without exception. This is not theory. This is the oldest law of human bargaining. Now let us pull the lens back further. Let us talk about the deeper pattern. Because I have spent decades studying international relations, and what I see in this moment is not unique to Trump. It is unique to a particular kind of leader who rises in moments of democratic exhaustion. The leader who promises simplicity in a complex world. The leader who mistakes noise for power and performance for strategy. We saw Berlusconi in Italy. We saw Orban in Hungary. We saw Bolsonaro in Brazil. Each of them arrived with a mythology of personal strength. And each of them discovered eventually that the world does not negotiate with mythology. But here is what makes the Trump case historically singular. America is not Italy. America is not Hungary. America is the country that designed the post-1945 world order. The United Nations headquarters sits in New York. The World Bank and IMF were conceived at Bretton Woods by American minds. The NATO alliance was America's strategic gift to a broken Europe. When America steps back, even partially, even rhetorically, the vacuum is not filled with peace. It is filled with ambition. Chinese ambition in the South China Sea. Russian ambition on the Eurasian steppe. Iranian ambition in the Persian Gulf. And the withdrawal of American credibility, which is what Trump's walk away from war posture represents, does not reduce conflict. It licenses it. History teaches us this again and again with brutal consistency. The 1930s are the canonical example, and I raise them not for drama but for precision. When Britain and France appeased Hitler at Munich in 1938, they were not cowards. They were exhausted. They had lived through the First World War. They had seen the trenches. They genuinely believed that giving Hitler the Sudetenland would satisfy him, that a man who wanted control could be managed with concessions. Churchill called it feeding the crocodile, hoping it will eat you last. We know how that story ended. 50 million people died to correct the mistake of 1 year of strategic retreat. Now, I'm not saying Vladimir Putin is Hitler. History does not repeat itself with such clean precision. But the structural logic is the same. When a revisionist power, a power that wants to redraw the map, sees that the guarantor of the existing order is willing to walk away, it does not conclude that peace is possible. It concludes that aggression is profitable. And that conclusion will outlast whatever ceasefire Trump claims as a victory. That conclusion will shape the next decade of Eurasian geopolitics in ways that no American administration, Republican or Democrat, will be able to easily reverse. And so we come to where we are tonight. Trump believed he was in control. He came into this conflict as the would-be architect of peace, or at least the would-be architect of the appearance of peace. And he is now walking away, not with a treaty, not with a framework, not with a stable ceasefire monitored by credible international mechanisms. He is walking away with frustration, with deflected blame, with the language of a man who has realized that the game is harder than the campaign rally made it sound. He is calling Zelensky difficult. He is calling European leaders ungrateful. He is doing what powerful men do when they fail at something. He is rewriting the narrative in real time before the history books can catch up with the facts. But the history books will catch up. They always do. Here's what I want to leave you with tonight. Power is not a performance. Strategy is not a slogan. Peace is not a deal you announce before the cameras. It is an architecture you build over years with patience, with credibility, with the understanding that the world's problems were not created in a single term and cannot be solved in one. The leaders who have genuinely shaped history understood something that separates statecraft from showmanship. Bismarck, who unified Germany through calibrated realism. FDR, who mobilized a reluctant America against fascism. Adenauer, who rebuilt a shattered Germany into the heart of European democracy. They all shared one quality. They understood that they were not the most important actor in the room. History was, and they positioned themselves accordingly. Trump positioned himself as the main character. And in geopolitics, as in literature, the main character who believes a story is about him is usually the one who gets the lesson and pays the price. The war in Ukraine is not over. The alliance is not healed. The world is not safer. And America, that great, complicated, still essential nation, is standing at a crossroads that it has stood at before. In 1919, when it retreated into isolationism after Versailles and helped create the conditions for World War II. In 1975, when the fall of Saigon signaled to the world that American commitment had limits. And tonight, in 2026, when a president walked away from a war he said he could end. And in doing so, sent a signal to every capital on earth that American power for now is negotiable. Study history, not because the past repeats itself, but because it rhymes. And right now, the rhyme is getting very, very loud. Don't stop here. The world is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. Click on the next video and join us as we explore even more astonishing revelations about the forces shaping our future and the hidden patterns that connect past to present.